On today's podcast, we welcome artist manager Ric Salmon from ATC Management. They manage PJ Harvey, Nick Cave, Radiohead, and many other artists, producers, and songwriters. We discuss the increasingly important role that managers have in an artist's career, how record labels have different value for artists today, and what he sees are the most significant factors that prevent artists from achieving success. This is a very informative and revealing conversation, and one you can't afford to miss. Insiders, are you ready?
Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sit down with Ric Salmon from ATC Management. We discuss the growing importance managers have in an artist's career today, how labels have different value for artists depending on what level they're at in their career, as well as what prevents artists from achieving success. This is a very informative and revealing conversation that you simply can't afford to miss. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source, serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today, we have a very, very special guest. We had an incredible conversation with artist manager Ric Salmon from ATC Management. It's rare that you have a conversation with somebody who has, number one, as broad and as deep of a knowledge of the business as he has, and who is as articulate about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. This one was an incredible interview with a lot of insight. One of the things that I picked up initially was when he talked about the whole idea of the artist-manager relationship and how hard that is to maintain.
Yes.
Because there's so many different things that are going into that relationship. And, we talked about Ed Bicknell and Paul McGuinness, which is, U2's manager, and about how each of those relationships, and I could probably relate also to like maybe Dave Matthews' manager, that they started Corin, when they started from the beginning, and how those have had just major successes and how rare that really is.
Yeah, it is. It's, when you think about it in our business, it's very, very, very rare. Irving Azoff and the Eagles, Corin Capshaw and Dave Matthews. I mean, these are, relationships that go back many, 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 many years. And, one of the things that he said in relation to that, Eric, which I thought was very true, is it is a chemistry element. It is a chemistry between you and that manager. How well do you get along? I mean, I think he used the example of Stuart Camp, who handles Ed Sheeran from the very beginning of his career, right. Jonathan Dickens, who handles Adele from the very start of her career, and just the feat of that actual relationship. But more importantly to our listeners, the idea of how important management is today in that world is absolutely crucial. It's, if you don't have someone guiding you and being the quarterback for your career, it can very, very easily go off sides, if you will.
Absolutely. And with that, Insiders, sit back, relax, and really listen to this episode because it's an amazing one with Ric Salmon.
Ric, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I always like to begin these conversations with a question to each of our guests. Do you remember when in your life that you decided that the music industry was going to be your professional career path?
It's a really good question. And I think the answer was literally when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I started playing piano when I was 4. I was trained classically. It was all I ever did. I danced around for a bit. My dad was a pilot for British Airways. And I think like most dads, like most sons of dads, you kind of think about doing what your dad does. So I half thought about maybe being a pilot for a bit, but that went by the age of about 11, and it was all I ever wanted to do. I think the tricky thing about getting into the music industry is that entry point. So I finished my degree, and 21 years old, and you're trying to work out how do you get in, where do you get in? And I think it's a little easier nowadays in the sense that there are gateway programs for young people to get into the industry. That didn't really exist back then. I'm 47 now, so it was a while ago, 26 years ago. So it's just trying to find that first little entry point, and then as soon as you got through, I haven't looked back.
Absolutely, you haven't, and you've had a very, very great career.
No, thanks, man.
Rick, it's Eric. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Hey,
I wanted to ask you, it's said today that managers are more important in an artist's career than at any other time due to the, radically changing nature of the business. And I'm curious, would you agree? And if so, why?
I think I definitely agree. Why is it? It's a good question. I think the music industry has got more and more complicated over the years. I think we live in arguably one of the most exciting periods the industry's gone through, and a period of continued growth, which is great to see, but becoming more and more complicated. The rights landscape gets more and more complicated as there are more technological advances. I've had some experiences with that just in the last couple of years with what we've done with live streams, which we can come on to later if we need. But I think the manager is the CEO of the artist business, right? And ultimately, what we should all be striving to do in the music industry is to develop artists' long-term careers. Not thinking in the, and everyone within the music industry has to think in perhaps slightly different metrics. If you're a radio plugger, you see the industry through one prism, right? You're going to set your own KPIs based on what you and your job has to deliver, which is to have radio hits and to get airplay, right, and playlists. A live touring agent's job is to go out there and develop the live touring of an artist's career and incrementally build that business. But an artist manager, you don't turn on and off. It is a 24/7, 365 day a year job. Regardless of if the artist is in or out of cycle, you are thinking about how to build that artist's career, not just in their music programming, but also whatever art form that artist wants to do, whatever business that artist wants to get into, whether that's fashion or branding of some sort, or books or film or whatever it might be. A lot of artists, and certainly the artists that ATC works with, which is where I'm a partner, tend to be quite multidisciplinary artists. So you have artists that are making films and writing books and doing poetry and in some cases sculptures. I mean, Brian, my partner who manages Nick Cave, he's a filmmaker and a writer and an author, and he's just done an incredible series of beautiful sculptures and so on and so forth. And you've got to try and work out how you can support that artist, not just kind of philosophically and creatively, but from a business perspective. And that may in some cases mean finding investment for a new venture that they want to entertain or whatever it might be. So look, I think it is a more and more complex task, but it's a more and more important role.
Yeah, and I love the way that you use the analogy that the manager is the CEO, because like the way that I correlate it to is like they're the quarterback of the team, and it's a beautiful way of putting it.
And it's fascinating. Look, I've been doing it long enough now where I've seen lots of different types of managers and lots of different types of artists' demands. There are, of course, quite a number of artists when they get into the later stages of their career where they decide maybe they don't even want a manager. Look, I'm never going to say that an artist is right or wrong to get to that opinion, because at the end of the day, an artist will make those decisions based on their experiences, and maybe they've had enough bad experiences where they don't want to have a business partner, as it were. It's really hard, right, to find anything in life. It's really hard to find a personal partner, a wife or a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. It's very difficult to find a business partner to have a very long-term career with. And it's very difficult to be in a manager-client-artist relationship that can last, a lifetime. When you see it happen, it tends to be a magical thing. And those artists, bizarrely, tend to be some of the most successful artists on the planet, right? That's not, right. I don't think, a coincidence. But it takes all types, and it really depends on the type of artist you are, the type of, the type of ambitions you have as an artist, and ultimately the kind of personalities that you can mix with. It's a complex thing.
It's so interesting listening to you say about that, because I had this very conversation with Ed Bicknell, right, who agrees with you totally on that, and he talked about the fact that Paul McGuinness, himself with the manager of Dire Straits, being the manager of Dire Straits, Paul McGuinness handling U2, that that aspect, that relationship is very, very important. And it is, in Ed's mind, it was a chemistry thing. It is a chemistry thing between you and the client.
It is. And look, I think there are some great modern day examples. I mean, Ed's a legend, obviously. Paul, these guys are legends of our industry. There are some great modern day examples of that as well. I mean, so if we look at two British artists who happen to have become global superstars, Adele and Ed Sheeran. So Jonathan Dickens that looks after Adele and Stuart Camp that manages Ed, both have worked with them from the beginning of their careers. That's an incredible task, right? Imagine being Jonathan in, shoes of Jonathan managing Adele, arguably the most successful recording artist of modern times, the last 20, 30 years. Just keeping her as a friend and as a client is an incredible success, let alone having the success they then had from a kind of a business perspective. And I think you're right. It's an incredible mix of chemistry that enables that to happen. But when it does, it's a beautiful thing. Again, look, closer to home, I've had those experiences with artists that I've managed for long periods of time. I managed Seal for a long time, for example, and he was a dear friend and remains so. My partner Brian managing Radiohead their whole career, you can imagine the challenges that would have thrown up over the last 27, 28 years. And in that instance, there's actually 4 managers that work as a team across Radiohead's management, and it's a joy to watch those 4 characters as the managers mix with the characters in the band, and somehow over that incredibly long period of time have made it work. It's a beautiful thing to behold when it works.
Oh, absolutely. And the diversification, I mean, within Radiohead with, Johnny's career, which is totally different from a band and it's in the film world, which is a different entity than music altogether, a different aspect of music. I want to ask you, your company, ATC Management, you began in artist management, but interestingly, as you've mentioned, your company has evolved over time into a far more broad-based artist-centric company that's involved in far more areas than just artist management. Was this out of a desire, I guess, to diversify, or a necessity to meet the changing demands of the marketplace today?
It's a really good question. Firstly, look, I wouldn't ever be so bold to call it my company as such. I mean, listen, I'm a shareholder there, but there's a group of us.
As a partner.
There's a group of us that are there. And I think that's a lot of the answer is in that. So Brian and Craig started the business maybe 27 years ago, something like that. I became a partner there 8 years ago, something like that. There are 3 main divisions, management, live, and now we have Drift, this live streaming business that's having a lot of success. There are a group of, it's 7 or 8 of us, let's call it, on the senior management team across those divisions. So Brian and Craig, obviously still, and then Alex Bruford, who runs ATC Live, who is an incredible agent. Sumit and Johnny, who run the 2 management divisions in Europe and the US. Me running Drift, and then Emma, who's our head of business affairs, and then obviously our CFO. So it's a group of about 7 or 8 of us that run the business. There's about 100 or so people that work at the group of companies across the board. Oh, I should mention Adam Driscoll as well, who's our Group CEO at ATC. I think the crucial thing about it is that, like many companies where there's such a diversified group of skills required, you need to build a team of people that are specialists in those areas and that can ultimately work together to be greater than the sum of its parts, I guess. And ATC's grown a lot over the years that I've been there. I think when I joined, there was maybe 25 clients. There's now, I think, 70 for management, and the live agency had just started the year before. And so at the time, I think when I joined, they're only looking after 30 or 40 clients. I think Alex and his team now represent something like 500 bands for their touring. So it's grown a lot, and we brought in skill sets and personalities to evolve it as it's been necessary, really. But I think I look at other businesses in the sector, whether that's Crush Management here. I've just been on the panel with those guys, or any larger, Red Light, any larger organization over here in the US. You always find that there's a group of very interesting people that have different backgrounds and different skill sets and different personalities. I think, look, management generally, or let's call it working in the creative arts directly with creators, it's an incredibly unique industry in the sense that you're dealing with an incredibly broad and diverse selection of personalities, right? And the only way I can describe it from my own perspective is when I was at school, I was always the guy that if there was a fight in the playground, I'd be the guy that would go and try and break up the fight. I was not the guy starting the fight. I would be the guy that would try and make everyone happy and try and see it from both sides. And, you know, it's just who you are as a personality, right? I've got 2 young sons. I can imagine one of them will make an excellent artist manager. I don't know if the other one perhaps necessarily would, and I won't name their names in case they ever listen to this podcast in future years. But I think it very much comes down to the kind of the natural characteristics that you have in your personality, to be honest.
You know, Ric, today, at what point do you feel an artist needs a manager?
Good question. I think my gut instinct to that answer is that the sooner the better, to be honest. I think, but maybe that artist means something slightly different in the earlier stages of an artist's career to when it develops. I think you need people around you that you can trust from the very beginning. In some cases, I've seen artists working with their parents in that context. That can work, but it also has its challenges. A great example, actually, of current artist is Dua Lipa, of course, whose father still manages her, and it's going obviously extremely well. I think that can cause some issues because, of course, that type of personal relationship can be difficult to work in and around for other people, you know, in that kind of family environment. But I think ultimately, at the beginning stages of an artist's career, they need to be surrounded by people that they can trust, that they can be honest with, that they can be challenged by. There's never any point surrounding yourself with people that just think everything you do is brilliant. You need to have people around you that can tell you carefully and delicately, they can feed back to you what is good, but what is also not so good. Because out of that kind of conflict comes progression and ultimately excellence. If you're just surrounded by people that are just saying everything you're doing is great, then that's going to lead towards mediocrity, and that's not good for anybody. So I think those early stages, it's people that you can trust, people that you can have support you. It may well be that person perhaps becomes obsolete after a certain point, right? Because there have been good examples. I think it's fair to say, I can say this about Coldplay, because I think it's been fairly well documented. Their original manager, who was a super nice guy, grew up with them at school, got them to a certain point, but then they needed to have
break
someone.
They did a
little bit, and I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for everyone involved. But at a certain point, you do need someone that can truly kind of continue to scale your business, and it's a specific skill set. Look, best case scenario, that person grows with you, and they have the intelligence and the business acumen and the nous and the charisma and the confidence and everything that you need to grow and evolve their own skill set so that they can kind of continue to work with you. But yeah, certainly I've seen it quite a lot where there's a bit of a glass ceiling to where one person's skill can go. What I don't like to see is where young managers who are great get eaten up by someone else, a bigger management company, and then spat out. Let's say, right? That has happened. You see it happen a fair bit. I must admit, I see it happening a lot less now. But I think, you know, that's something we need to be conscious of.
You know, when you take on a client, you always hear, you know, what do you look for? It's the talent, the uniqueness of the artist, the vision, etc. And those, you know, I understand are givens. One of the things, and I know you know this, and this is why I want to ask you this, because it's not spoken of a lot, which is, I want to get from you, Ric, what are the non-creative qualities you look for? And by that, I mean, and you don't need to name names, you've probably come across talent in your career that's incredible, that you love, that's brilliant. But for whatever reason, you don't take it on. And so I'm curious, what are those non-creative qualities that maybe you're not even like going to tell them about, but that you're looking for in someone that you're going to say, yes, I want to work with you?
Yeah. Or worse still, that you do take them on and you only realize after the event that perhaps they don't. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant question. It's not really something I've been asked before. I think one of the most resonating qualities of artists that seem to go forward is the ability to truly collaborate. Now, I qualify that by saying most, if not all, brilliant artists have an incredibly clear vision about who they are. And actually, the danger of collaboration is that you can end up watering down what your vision is. So it needs to be a really careful balance of being incredibly clear with your vision, absolutely laser focused with what direction you're traveling in, but being able to collaborate with people along the way to realize that vision and that dream. And fundamentally, it comes down to humility. There is no artist on the planet that can do it all. In fact, I would go as far to say most great artists on the planet can do one thing incredibly well. They can't necessarily do the second, third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth, 28th thing that they have to do. They need to rely on other people to do that. You know, some of the greatest artists of all time had the most incredible voices, but didn't write songs. Elvis. Some others had the most incredible voices, had the most incredible ability to write songs, but had really dodgy singing voices, but very unique. To your example earlier with Ed Bicknell, Mark Knopfler, an incredible writer, and most importantly, one of the greatest guitar players of all time, right?
Yeah.
But not a great vocalist in the traditional sense. A great vocalist in the sense that he has an incredibly unique voice, but not a he's not a technical singer,
right,
and would never profess to be. Bob Dylan, you can hardly understand what he's saying, right? But he's one of the greatest writers of all time. So look, that's an oversimplified way of explaining it, but the point is you need to have a vision and you need to be able to collaborate in a way where everybody feels invested in the process so that you can get the best out of everybody, right? Again, to use the Radiohead example or the Nick Cave example, you know, clients that our company works with broadly, Radiohead would never be Radiohead without the combination of the five of them in the band, right? And especially actually the five of them in the band, but especially if you look at the combination of people like Tom York and Johnny Greenwood and what magic occurs in between those two, but all of them. Similarly with Nick Cave would probably not be where Nick Cave is without Warren Ellis, who's his long-term collaborator. There's always that. U2 would not be U2 without Bono and The Edge, right? So how do you maintain collaboration without falling out? How do you maintain collaboration where everyone feels invested? How do you maintain collaboration yet everybody feel like they're still stuck to their clear, laser-focused vision? It's a really complex thing to pull off, but you need to have that personality where you can do that. And I think the artists that I've seen that haven't worked, including a number of artists, frankly, with total respect to them, that I've worked with, and perhaps I wasn't a good enough manager for them, or I wasn't the right manager for them, but they have not gone on to have success. Probably also, perhaps because their personalities weren't quite the right fit. Maybe for me as their manager, but also the fit for the industry, maybe.
You know, I wanted to ask you, is the value of a record label in today's world the same for all artists?
Definitely not. And I think, you know, what is a record label these days? It means so many different things, right? I mean, I think the beauty of the way the industry's evolved is that there are now countless ways an artist can get their music to fans. A traditional record label, let's call it a traditional record label deal, where an artist signs a rights-based deal and a team of marketeers and A&R people and other sales execs and everyone around them all works together to create some sort of global momentum. When those machines work in the context of those artists, it's a beautiful thing to behold, whether that's The Weeknd or an Ariana Grande or whatever it might be, that you need in some ways those big global machines. I think for certain genres, especially that kind of top-end pop stuff. But at the same time, there are hugely successful artists with global careers who are on small indie labels and have always been on small indie labels. I mean, look, Adele started on a small indie label on XL, right? So I think it very much depends on the type of artist you are, perhaps the type of genre you work within, and the type of label that you need and want, and what resources those labels have at their disposal. So I don't think there's one easy answer. I don't think it's a one size fits all thing.
It's interesting listening to your answer of what Eric was asking, and it makes me want to look at the idea of what success is. Do you think, Rick, in your time in the business, that we have redefined what the definition of success is today?
I definitely do, in the sense that, well, especially if you look in the US, I think the US is still, if you don't mind me saying, as actually the UK to a certain extent as well, but US being such a massive market, it's a big kind of oil tanker that's taking its time to kind of turn a corner. I think it's strange to me that the industry still looks at metrics such as radio play and chart positions and sales and stuff, because those are just not important anymore. I'm not saying they're obsolete, but they're not an important barometer of someone's success. There are plenty of artists who the mainstream have never heard of, who have multi-million-dollar revenue generating businesses and can go on tour and play arenas and in some cases stadiums, but you'd never see them with a radio hit or a chart position on an album or anything like that. So I think the metrics have completely changed. I think we've still got a long way to go until that becomes commonplace in the industry. But I think the slight issue we've got in the music industry is that people always need some level of what KPIs, right? So there needs to be some measurement of success that can be measured in some sort of data. And of course, that now also includes the number of playlists you have, the number of monthly listeners you've got, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a continuously evolving beast, but it certainly means a different thing now to what it meant earlier. And look, I think we talk about this a lot in the industry. There is a huge discrepancy between artists that have huge streaming numbers, for example, and then in many cases may not be able to tour even fairly small rooms around the world because one thing does not mean the other. And vice versa. There will be artists that will be playing in front of 20,000, capacity crowds in all major markets around the world, yet will only have 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. So it creates a more complex picture. One thing definitely doesn't mean the other, and there are obviously so many different influencing factors around that. What type? Obviously, pop over indexes on Spotify, rock massively under indexes, but you'll get a band that has, as I said, less than 1 million streamers playing to massive audiences. So I think we've got to be very careful not to be so myopic in the way that we analyze success. Success can look very different in different areas and different ways.
And for our audience, just so they know, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, KPIs are key performance indicators,
Sorry, yeah.
metrics. No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure that, we're educating our audience because these are comprised of new artists and new people that are trying to enter in the industry.
So a KPI or any measurement of success. So if key performance indicator. So how does one analyze whether or not you're actually succeeding in the task that you've set yourself? Exactly.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. So, hey, Rich, tell me a little bit about the Music Business Registry.
Well, what we are, Music Business Registry is the leading contact directory. We publish all of the most current, accurate, and up-to-date contact information for the music industry. We do directories for A&R. We do directories for music publishers. We do directories for film and television music. We do directories of artist managers, and we do directories of music attorneys. And we also sell other publications too, like the Indie Bible series, the YouTube Bible series, the Indie Spotify Bible series, and other things as well. That's what we're about.
So if I wanted to find out, let's say, the music supervisor for American Horror Story, I can kind of go into the Film and TV monthly and find the information that I need there?
Well, we don't list specific shows. If you know who the music supervisor is, and you can find that out on IMDb, then you can find their contact information. And we have that in our Film and Television Music Monthly. Absolutely, yes.
That's great. And I hear that we have a discount right now. If you go to musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first order.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we offer that to all of the MUBUTV insiders.
So insiders, check out musicregistry.com and use MUBUTV10 as your coupon code. I have a question that's probably one of the most profound questions that I cannot take credit for. I'll have to credit Rich for this one. What do you think holds people back from success in their music careers?
Wow. Are you talking themselves, not because of the people around them? Yeah.
Correct.
Right. Sometimes arrogance at one end of the spectrum, and then sometimes a lack of confidence at the other end of the spectrum. And sometimes those two things are not mutually exclusive as well. You can tend to find a lot of people that exude confidence are enormously insecure, and vice versa. What else is one thing that holds people back? It's a really good question. I suppose the inability to read the room, and by that I mean not just in their day-to-day way they're going about doing their business, but also in the way that fans react to their music. To my earlier point about being laser focused is great and is crucially important, but that doesn't mean don't listen to people's feedback. You can do the two things at the same time, and I've seen it a fair bit with artists in over the years where perhaps they don't take on advice or don't listen perhaps to what's being said, and it's crucially important, I think, to be able to both retain that kind of innate confidence that you need as an artist and that laser focus, but also to take on board criticism and take it in a constructive way.
You've been a manager for 20, as you said, 27 years now, and you've been in the business a long time, and you've, as we've talked in this conversation, worked with many great managers and known many great managers. A lot of our audience, are up and coming music business professionals who are really interested in the career of artist management. What would you say are the attributes or the qualities that you feel someone needs to become a great manager? I mean, beyond the knowledge aspect, but what are the personality qualities? What are the traits that you think are really important in that particular profession?
Patience, communication skills, the ability to see everybody's point of view at the same time, because obviously the creative arts and everything within it is a very subjective industry, right? And what one person's passion may be, what someone may hate, right? I happen to love, I love all music, but I happen to love as one of the things that I'll listen to for my kind of relaxation at home, really quite avant-garde modern jazz, right? And it's my happy place. To me, the more complex and the more, in some cases, atonal something is, the more comforting and relaxing I find it. In complete contrast, my wife, when I'm playing that music in the kitchen, when I'm cooking dinner for us, to her, it sounds like someone's scratching their nails down a blackboard, right? So everything is so subjective. And I think as a manager, you need the ability to be able to, at all times, see everybody's point of view and take on board everyone's different viewpoints, and then ultimately be able to communicate that with the artist that you're working with so that you can benefit from that process. I think at any one time, a manager is juggling 1,000 things. You have to be hyper organized. You have to be on top of an incredible amount of detail. You're talking at any one time to literally hundreds, if not thousands of people across a roster of artists you're working with. You might be dealing with one artist. You're probably, if you're thinking of all of the promoters, agents, label people, marketing people, musicians, band members, crew members, if you're working with a big artist, the ecosystem around an artist runs into the 300, 400, 500 people easily, right? If you count everybody. So if you're dealing with 3 or 4 artists at that level, then you're dealing with thousands of people. It takes good brain power. It takes incredible organizational skills, incredible communication skills, but also you have to, and I definitely get this wrong still a lot of the time, you have to realize your strengths and work with your weaknesses. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Weaknesses aren't a bad thing. It's just an area that isn't a strength. And you have to be able to surround yourself with people, if you can, whether you're a one-man band artist, one-man band manager, or if you're working in a larger organization, try and surround yourself with people that are good at the bits you're not. And I know that's really, really hard in the early stages of a career because you don't have the money to be able to bring on other staff, and you may not be able to pay for an accountant or a manager or a lawyer or so on and so forth. But you will get there quite quickly if you're working with an artist that has some level of, potential. So try to recognize where you need support and where you need help. Don't feel anxious or paranoid about that. The fact that that's a negative. That is not a negative. I read a brilliant, American audience perhaps know him a little less, but there's an incredible entrepreneur from the UK that started Virgin Records and then Virgin Atlantic, Richard Branson.
We were just talking about him yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
So
great.
Amazing guys.
One of my heroes.
Right. A real legend in many ways. Very complex character though. Very dyslexic. Left school at 16. Terrible with numbers, bizarrely. And he said, I saw something on Instagram a few weeks ago, he was saying that it was quite late on in his career, I think, when he was about 50, that he was sitting in a board meeting and someone was explaining some pretty basic economics about net profit and gross margins and all this kind of stuff. So stuff you would have thought Richard Branson knows. And one of the main guys in the meeting turned around to him and took him to one side and said, you don't know what that means, do you? And he admitted that he didn't. And it doesn't matter. That didn't stop him having those successes. As long as you can surround. Listen, I would caveat to that comment is try to learn, try to understand as much as you can, try and be a student of everything that you can be in the industry. It's a very complex industry. Read all the books. Go to all the lectures, go to all of the conferences, go to Muse Expo, go to, South by Southwest, sit in those keynote speeches, sit on those panels and listen and learn, because the more you learn, the more you understand, and the better you will be at your job. So I think all of those things kind of wrapped up together is a little bit of advice for managers.
I wanted to ask you, Ric, you're the CEO of an innovative live streaming platform called Drift. What does the market demand creatively and technically from live streaming platforms today?
What is the market demand for live streaming platforms? It's a continuously evolving sector. We've been very fortunate. I've been incredibly privileged to have been on the journey with it. My partner Brian and I started it at the beginning of the pandemic, and we had no intentions necessarily of turning it into a standalone business initially. It was just us trying to be creative and entrepreneurial with some of the artists that we work with at a time when obviously we'd had the tap turned off. It just so happened that those first couple of shows were hugely successful, and then we set up the business as a standalone company to go on and do what it's done. And we've done nearly 1 million tickets, generated not far off $30 million in revenues for the artists that we've worked with in the last couple of years in this brand new sector. We know it's there. We're continuing to have a lot of success with it. It's been incredibly hard. It's been incredibly challenging. And again, to younger people coming into the industry, and it feels weird me say those sentences, and you even saying to me that I'm the CEO of a company, I still feel like a kid myself. I still feel like a 22-year-old, and I'm still learning, and I'm learning more these days than I probably ever learned. I can honestly say the last couple of years has been the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I think I probably had more challenges to overcome personally and professionally, just through what we go through and what we've all been through in the last couple of years. Through those moments of adversity and through those kind of challenging times, you really dig deep, and I think you learn more about who you are as a human being, and you come out of it a better person. And that's really important learning curve. You never give up when you're faced with these challenges. And the result of that has been, now that we've been through a period, we were working in an incredible vacuum in the first year and a half because, of course, everyone wanted to do a live stream. We were able to establish the model and develop the business in a very specific way. There was an inevitable readjustment as the world came back to normal. Everyone was just hyper-focused on getting back out and doing shows and being, getting out in front of fans. Quite rightly, we wanted that too. I think now we've come through that kind of readjustment. To me, I'm beginning to see a bit of a direction of travel as to where this is going. And I'm super excited about being a part of the fact that this is a new revenue stream. It's a new tool that we can make use of. Managers are always searching for new ways of helping their artists communicate with fans, right? The whole industry is predicated on storytelling. We want to belong to a gang. We want to belong to people, a tribe of people that we have similar tastes and similar likes, right? As human beings, that is just second nature to us. And music is one of those incredible mediums through which we can come together collectively and feel better about ourselves and laugh and cry and dance and make love and throw each other around on the dance floor and so on and so forth. And it's such a powerful tool. And one of the things that we're always striving to do is, how do we pull ourselves out of that horrible cycle of just release a single, release an album, take something to radio, go on tour, release an EP, and then go back round the cycle that's been going on for 30 or 40 years. We're always trying to find new ways of breaking out of that cycle, right? And it's hard. Sometimes you might find an artist writes a book, great. Sometimes an artist might do some poetry or some whatever it might be, make a film. At least live streaming has come along and give us another tool, another way, a long form piece of content that can be created, that we can get fans around the world around these collective live experiences. I think sport has done it incredibly well over the years. It's evolved to a point where there are record numbers of attendees at sports grounds in every sport, whether that's Formula One, American football, soccer, whatever it is, record attendees and record viewership numbers on TV and online, right? They've worked out the combination of the two. The music industry lags behind. We have never until the pandemic thought about how we can digitize or extend globally the reach of live events. It didn't exist before the pandemic. No, live streaming's been around for a decade. No one's ever been able to unlock how to do that. It would be the equivalent of the Super Bowl saying, you know what, we're not going to broadcast the Super Bowl this year. You're only going to see it if you can buy a ticket for the stadium. That makes no sense. So why not, in the music industry, if an artist is on tour, why not at the end of the tour, because they're not going to be going on tour for another 2 years, why not live stream the last night of the tour? Because fans will love to be a part of that. And one other final comment on that, let's not forget, because of the advent of audio streaming, we now know, of course, that we have fans in every single corner of the world, right? Before the advent of digital music, you could only listen to music on radio, or if you were wealthy enough or lucky enough to live near a city that had a record store, you could buy a record, right? That was the only way you could consume music, which meant 95% of the world wasn't consuming music properly or truly engaging with it. Now, of course, that's completely been turned on its head. The one amazing thing about audio streaming is it's enabled, it's given access to people wherever they are on the planet to listen to music and engage with their favorite artists. We should be doing that with live music as well. Even if an artist does a huge global tour, they might play in 50 cities in maybe 8 countries, right? You're going to play in 20 cities in America. You might play in 3 cities in the UK, and you might go and play in 1 or 2 cities in 4 or 5 European countries. And possibly, if you're a big enough artist, you might play in a few cities in South America and Australia. But only the biggest artists do those kind of tours. Even then, you're only playing in 40 or 50 cities, 50, 60 cities, right? That is a tiny, tiny subset of your fan base. So why on earth wouldn't you allow access to artists to immerse themselves in those collective live experiences wherever they are on the planet, right? It makes it seems so sensible.
No, it absolutely does. You know,
I rambled on a bit there because it's a passionate subject for me.
Yeah, no, it's
absolutely. I want to ask you, in your life, have there been any films or books that you've read that have been particularly inspiring to you, professionally speaking, that you can recommend to our audience?
Yeah, I went through a phase when I was younger of reading every single autobiography and biography and music industry book, whether it's, David Geffen book, whether it's the Walter Yetnikoff book, Howling at the Moon, whether it's Quincy Jones's autobiography, Q, which is incredible, Miles Davis's autobiography, which is one of the greatest books I've ever read. And then some of the industry books, Donald S. Passman's legendary, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry, which is still, I think, in its probably 20th edition now.
Yeah,
10th right now.
Yeah, you just put it, you had him on the show.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. He said that was the longest revision. He just done 10 editions. He said that one took him the longest amount of time.
4 years, I believe.
4 years between the 9th and the 10th.
Well,
I
read the first one. It was my Bible, right? When I got into the music industry, it was literally my Bible. Yeah. But of course, the digital music didn't exist at that time.
And that's what he covers more on this book. Yeah.
It's crazy, right? So I think all those books, but also I would say, so I'm now in a phase in my life where I'm pushing myself and into areas of literature that I didn't read before. And I would always encourage younger people coming into the music industry, read as much as you can, read everything you can, read things that you didn't think you would like. So, I mean, I'm reading a lot of Russian literature at the moment, which might sound a bit crazy, but whether it's Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or whatever it is, it's resonating with me. And it's incredible how much I've learned from it in the way that people interact with one another and the way that, you can read some of these books from in those cases, those authors' cases, 200, 250 years ago, and they feel like they were written yesterday. And you start to realize we're not that special. We don't live in a time that these experiences that we're all going through, they're not new. They've been
just secular. It's just gone in a cycle.
Right?
Yeah.
So challenge yourself, read everything you can, read things that really push yourself creatively, and you'll find inspiration from the strangest places.
Rick, what advice can you offer our listeners who are wanting to pursue a career in artist management? What would you say to them?
I think analyze your own music taste. Go back to one of my other points about realizing where your strengths are. Work out the type of human being you are and the type of areas that really interest you. Then target people that work in those similar passion areas, right? So if you're a hugely passionate electronic music fan, search out companies that work and management companies and people and agents that work in those sectors. And conversely, if you're a massive rock music fan, do the same. So try and connect with people that are like-minded, right? And try and connect with people that you probably got loads of things in common with already. That's, again, one of the beauties about the creative industries, right? So I think try to instill your taste as early as you can, because taste is something that is invaluable, right? It is priceless. And if you have whatever taste that is, it doesn't matter what what background you come from, what sector you want to go into, what genre really moves you. It doesn't matter what your sexuality, your race, your socioeconomic group, nothing matters. Everyone is on a level playing field. And the one thing that is incredibly valuable is your taste and your ability to identify exciting talent and culture and trends. And that is something that companies find incredibly valuable, because it is that gold dust that creates industries, right? And so try and instill your taste on people, try and take risks, try and put things out there, try and connect to bands who you love as early as you possibly can. Try and get in any single way you possibly can. Work with anyone, for anyone, almost at any cost, which I know is counter in many ways to a lot of kind of cultural trends that are going on right now. I think there's a lot of debate around, work-life balance and what's important to younger people these days. So don't do it at the expense of your own mental health and so on and so forth, but throw yourself into everything and do everything you can to be as helpful to people around you as you possibly can, I guess.
I want to ask you the same question from the perspective of what you were saying before, is that you said a comment earlier in our conversation where you said this is an incredibly special time to be, entering the business or in the business right now where we're at. So on that basis, what advice would you have for recording artists who are committed to having a career in today's industry, who are just starting out?
Again, I'll use the word patience because it takes so much time. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for people that are coming into the industry now because of the sheer enormity of the task. It takes years now to kind of develop a career. I think you're very fortunate if from a standing start, you're making any proper headway within the first 5 years of your career. It's really that length of time before you can really expect to get any real movement going. So I think having patience and giving yourself time. Now, of course, the main challenge there is how do you support yourself financially during such a long period of time of growth? And there is no easy answer to that. It will mean working really hard. It'll probably mean having 2 or 3 jobs at the same time to do it. But try and, again, surround yourself with people that will support you. There is a lot of money flooding back into the music industry now that wasn't the case for a long time. So there is a lot of investment that can be made use of. There are a lot of companies that are investing a lot of money in developing talent, whether that's management companies or labels. So that's the good news, because that wasn't the case a decade ago. But I think, look, just generally speaking, you just have to you have to do everything you can to continue to evolve your craft, play as much as you can live, listen to as much feedback as you can, release as much music as you can. It's fine to release music that you maybe look back on slightly later down the line saying that was perhaps a little substandard. That's okay. If you really want, you can take it down off the streaming services in later years, but try and release as much as you can. Don't be afraid. I guess. Be fearless.
Ric, where can people best connect with you over at ATC and Drift?
We're pretty easy to get to, actually. I always notice a lot of management companies seem to make it quite hard to get to them. I never know why that. I mean, surely they're not getting bombarded that much, are they? I don't know. So on our website, so you can go to ATC and you'll see our contact details. Give us a ring, send us an email, look us up on LinkedIn, connect with us. I think I've responded to almost every single email I've ever received. So I'm always happy to do the same.
Ric, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to be here. Honestly, thank you. You guys are legends at what you do, Rich. You've done so many important things over the years and have been a real champion of developing artists over the years and everything that you've done. So thanks for having me. I really do mean it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wow. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, that was an incredible conversation.
Yeah, it's a masterclass.
That really was. Yeah, thank you, Eric. That's a great way to put it. This was a real masterclass from a master who's been at it for, over 20 something years, who really has the depth and the insight into not only management, but into the elements that make management such an important element in an artist's career, and all of the details and the non-spoken qualities that go into it.
Yeah, and we talked about it at the top of the show, and some of the things that we talked about with that artist-manager relationship and how important and rare it is to keep that relationship going. And
yes,
and when you find it, that typically there's a lot of success behind that. One of the things that I thought that was very important in this is to understand that the manager's role, it's a 24/7, 365 day a week job. This never ends. It never turns off. And and I loved what he talked about, that you're always thinking about how you can get that artist to the next level. And one of the things that I loved about it is when he talked about, for instance, with Nick Cave, with one of his partners that manages Nick Cave, he's more of a multifaceted artist that has different things that they're doing. It's not only music, but they're doing sculptures and it's about how to try to find work or get them work in those areas. And so I thought that was very important.
Absolutely. And that comes from understanding the nature and the gifts of your individual talent. Not everybody, management isn't generic.
Right.
As and that was, I think, his big point with that, is that you have to always be thinking that. Maybe it's a brand. Maybe it's a fashion element. Maybe in his case, like with Nick, it was sculptures.
Right.
And, finding the right vehicles and the right partners and the right brands and the right people to connect with for those things. It's not just, recording companies and touring. Sometimes it's a lot more than that. And developing those relationships as a manager is crucial to your clients and to yourself.
Yeah, one of the things that I love too, the analogy that he used, and we may have heard it in other episodes, but that the manager is like, I use the quarterback analogy, and he used the CEO of the team, which is really true. And it's so important for you guys that are listening right now that the manager, I guess the artist is the CEO, and I guess the manager might, play a more different role, like a president or a manager. I loved that he used that in this conversation. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting was how ATC, the management company that he works for and is a partner in, has diversified into other areas than just artist management. I believe they've gone into promotions and all that kind of stuff with bookings and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, artist services. In other words, they are serving the music industry of the 21st century. That it's not just about working with artists and music and records. It's about a lot more. And that, I thought, was one of the more interesting aspects of his particular career. He also mentioned the aspect of streaming, the live streaming company, Drift, that he's the head of. And that, I thought, was very interesting because he's been at the forefront of that during the pandemic. If you recall, he talked about, working with a lot of very successful streams. And that, to me, is something that I think in the future is going to become a much more significant aspect of the musical climate that we currently live in.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.